have two parts of our mind. We've got the conscious mind, we've got the subconscious mind. And they're really interesting because they can work in harmony with each other, but they can also work completely against each other. It really depends on how we're using it. Now remember, don't ever forget this. I mean, like, you want to write this down big on the front of your paper. Just keep it there for all 3 days. Write the word choice, right? It is your greatest power. Like, people think to themselves, and I think, the only conclusion I've ever been able to come up with as to why people don't realize this is because it's so obvious in our life all the time. It's kind of like air, right? I mean, how often do you really think about the air? Not very often. But you breathe, right? So you're using it every day. It's what keeps you alive. But every moment of every day you're using the power of choice. You're making decisions. Even if they're the same decisions, you're using it. And that power is what creates the life that you're existing in and that you're experiencing in right now. So you have to think about that for a little bit and really let that sink in, because you're either making a choice by using your conscious mind, or you're letting whatever your subconscious mind is programmed with make that choice for you. So prior to about the age of 7, we have no conscious mind developed. So like the top part of this head's not there. And everything that we're experiencing in our life is going in without any resistance, because the subconscious mind does not have the ability to reject anything. Acceptance or rejection is an intellectual factor that's part of our conscious mind. The subconscious mind is a few million years old. The conscious mind's only about 10,000. So the subconscious got a much bigger head start. The only 2 things the subconscious mind is really interested in is, 1, keeping you alive in the moment. It doesn't understand the future, and it doesn't understand the past. And then reproduction. Those are about the 2 things that it considers to be important. So whatever it gets programmed with, then it wants to stay on that path because you're not dying right here in the moment. Only if you present something that's unknown or something that you audibly or visually recognize as a threat will your subconscious mind react. Because that's intrinsically tied to your nervous system. You blind people can eat, if they were not blind at birth, they can see images in front of them that are threatening because the image is programmed not in the eyes, but it's directly tied to their central nervous system. So they can sense when something is wrong in front of them and the information is coming in through their eyes. This is scientific data. Now I want you to think about this for a second, because why is this important? Because everything that's programmed in your subconscious mind is how we do something. It's how. And it runs on automatic pilot, so you don't have to think about it. So if you think about driving a car, there's an awful lot of things that you have to learn how to do to drive a car. But you don't have to think about it anymore. You just get in the car and go. And you could do a lot of other things at the same time and still drive that car. And if you've been someplace multiple times, you don't even think about how to get there. You're probably thinking about what you were doing before you left or what you're going to do when you do get there, but you're not even really thinking about the journey that you're on trying to get there. So that's interesting, because the subconscious mind is telling the conscious mind what to think about what it's experiencing out here in your results, your circumstances, and your environment. Or I should say, it's telling it how to think about what you're experiencing. This is why I said earlier, we think we know how to think, but we really don't because we're not thinking. We're running on automatic pilot. All the information that we've been taught about things that we repetitively experience in our life are coming from our subconscious mind. But the real question that has to be asked in the moment is this: is what I was taught subconsciously based in any kind of truth whatsoever, or was it just somebody's idea that they developed that kept them safe in the moment? Because that is the primary job of your subconscious mind, to stay safe, to stay alive. So then you may ask yourself, well, is this rooted in any kind of scientific or psychological or even spiritual truth? And the answer is yes, because when we're born, the one main thing that we're concerned about is security. I mean, without our parents, we die. And that's not like a horrific idea, that's reality. If we don't have mom and dad, it's over. We cannot fend for ourselves. So what does that also imply? We're insecure. We're relying on another living being to take care of us so that we can live. So that gets programmed in our subconscious mind. I need to learn how to communicate with you if I'm your child, so that you feed me and that you change my diaper and you know if I'm cold or if I'm hot or if I'm sick. And as a parent, you pick up on those cues really quick and you learn how to respond to that child, even at 3 a.m. And that's also another interesting thing, because a lot of times, if the average person called you at 3 a.m. and said, feed them, you'd say, go fuck yourself, I'm sleeping. But with a child, we get up. But that's an amazing thing. I once heard somebody say it's amazing we don't throw children out the window because they're damn annoying. And they are when you really think about it. Like if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about, right? You love your children, you would do anything for them, but getting up at 3 a.m. is not a fun thing. So again, we have to think, what the hell is actually going on? That also means that inherently inside of us, we have the ability and some kind of primordial need to help other people survive. It's not just in that baby, but it's in us. But here's something that's fascinating. At the time of birth, when our mind is not even shapen yet, there's nothing in it, it's a blank slate, the first thing that we're learning is we're dependent upon somebody else. So if we're getting any kind of proper parenting as we're growing up, the idea is that the parent is supposed to be helping us become more and more independent, not dependent. But when people are not facing what scares them in life as adults, they don't become more and more independent. They become more and more dependent. And then they go out and have children, and they don't know how to teach independence because they're not independent. They're codependent. And currently we're seeing the result of raising nations of people that are codependent upon each other. You know, one of the biggest things that we can see as a verification of this is how much of a frenzy the world is in for everybody else to change so that the individual feels okay. that is a huge sign of emotional insecurity. Because if I know that I'm okay, I feel okay, I don't need your approval to do that. And your disapproval of it doesn't bother me either. So now, this communication that is actually taking place has a couple other pieces to it. Number one, we call it love. Love is the emotional, energetic, and chemical interaction between us and that child to form a bond. What's another word for that? Agreement. Because that's what it is. I'm making an agreement to take care of this child. But what I'm also teaching this child to do is to make an agreement to behave in a way that pleases me. And here's where the rub comes in. If that child doesn't please me, I may inadvertently indicate to this child that I'll break my agreement. Now, how would I do that? By showing anger to the child? By shaming the child? By guilting the child? By ignoring the child? By making the child feel very insecure. Because the child is going to adapt to its own insecurity faster than anything else. Remember, the child is extraordinarily self-centered at this stage of life because it needs to live. So it'll do whatever is necessary in order to get its needs met. And if you don't have a well-adapted parent, then manipulation becomes the order of the day in order to get the child to behave. So that you're not a wreck. Now, what does this ultimately do? Well, it builds the self-esteem of the child. Now, here's the thing about self-esteem. I am not a proponent of, nor do I think that it's okay, going around telling people, that's okay, you're fine just the way you are. No, you're not. If you're doing something to fuck up your life, you're not fine the way you are. And you need somebody to tell you that you're not fine the way you are, because sometimes we don't know it. Now, what does that do? Hopefully, it wakes us up and we can then evaluate with some perspective, why am I doing what I'm doing? But when it becomes too painful to look at that because we're too insecure on the inside and we've never learned the life skills or the emotional skills to help ourselves feel better, let alone ask someone else for help, we avoid, we numb, we ignore, we procrastinate, we make excuses. And then we can't figure out how to get ourselves to do what we already know how to do. And you know why I say that? Because I've watched the same people that can't get themselves to do something change like that when it comes up against something that scares them even more, like going bankrupt or having their car impounded or somebody leaving their life. Isn't it interesting? Like, it's rare that somebody cheats on their spouse and then comes and says, I really fucked up. Please forgive me. I'm going to do everything that I can to change. That happens after they get caught, right? Why does that happen after they get caught and not before? They know they're doing something that is against the vow that they made before. Why does it happen after? Exactly, Chris. Thank you. They know that they're going to lose something. But I think there's something even deeper about that. Because I've seen people really go off the rails in this situation. Yes, they know that they're going to lose something, but in their mind, it equals security. Because if you weren't happy in the fucking marriage to begin with, why didn't you just ask for a goddamn divorce and leave instead of cheating? Because you're afraid to be alone. That's why. So the person's now sorry because the consequence is overwhelming to their life. And I use that as an example because it's one that we can all understand. But here's the thing. Every one of us cheats in our life, including me. I'm not any different. I'm not anything special. Every one of us cheats in our life every time we say we're going to do something and we don't do it. The worst person you could cheat on is you. But when you do that, you break trust with yourself. And then before you know it, you can't even rely on yourself to do what you're going to say you're going to do. Now you have a problem. And it's a big problem. Because number one, you're living in an illusion. You're living in an illusion. You're probably telling yourself everything's okay or everything's going to be okay or it's going to get better. You're not willing to face what you're actually doing to make it any better. You probably have a certain amount of shame that's engaged. And because you have shame engaged, you won't ask for help. Because you don't want anybody to know that you're not keeping your word. You've become very proficient at making excuses for why you're not doing what it is that you're doing. And the worst part of all of this is that you're not growing, you're disintegrating. So it's not getting better. And everything that we repeat, whether it's something good that moves us forward, or it's something bad, I don't care what the reason is. It doesn't matter. Just remove the reason from your mind for a moment. When you do it, you reprogram your subconscious mind to keep doing it. So it's either repetitively get better or repetitively get worse. We're either growing or we're dying. There is no in between. We don't stay the same. And since you're the central point in your universe, in your world, in your life, you're the one that makes the choices to whether that's going to happen or not. Now, for everybody that's in business, what's the consequence of this? Because this might not be something you ever consider as being the consequence, but I guarantee you it's the consequence that affects the thing that affects your business the most, and that is your ability to influence somebody else because of your lack of integrity. When you don't have enough integrity with yourself, other people know it. And you lose the ability to influence them in any way that is going to benefit either one of you. As a matter of fact, you actually do influence them. It's just in a way that you don't like, because we then recognize that as rejection. And it's a big problem. And then we go into a delusion. You have a better marketing system that'll help me overcome that problem? No. Because even if we did, your inability to keep your word with yourself would screw it up. It would. It would. I've seen people take brilliant business ideas and plans and make them work, and other ones use the same thing and go, oh, this doesn't work for shit. Well, look at the operating system, sir. What's actually doing something? What's determining it? It's yourself. So we may not think that the little things that we're doing or not doing every day have really any effect on our life. But just remember the biblical saying from the New Testament, even what's hidden will be seen. Even what we do in secret will show itself. That's a psychological truth, it's a scientific truth, and it's a spiritual truth. It runs right down the core of everything. My mentor used to say, you can't hide anything from an aware person. They instantly know what's going on. But that's a person that's willing to look at both sides of themselves. And I'm not trying to stand up here and say, hey, listen, we all need to be perfect. That's not going to happen either. Because if perfection was an option, you wouldn't need the ability to choose. You got to also ask yourself the question, why do I have that ability? Like, that's a really interesting question for humanity. Why do we have the ability to choose? Like, conscious choice is a big thing. There has to be a reason for it. And part of the reason is so that we create. But here's the other part of the reason. Without the conscious awareness and use of choice, no growth can happen. Because we grow and get stronger by the determination of what it is that we choose or what we don't choose. If we want to stay ignorant and blind to something, that just makes us weaker. And you can stay in your excuse and whatever your reason is, all you want. And you may have, a lot of you have very justifiable reasons for it. Some of you have been through some horrific shit in your life. I understand that. From an intellectual perspective, some of it's very difficult to deal with all at once. So I'm not trying to make the victim wrong, but it's wrong when you stay that way. Like, it's your job to find a way out. The shovel that you use to dig yourself out of there is your ability to choose. It doesn't matter how fast you go. It just matters that you do it. I mean, look, we all do it one shovel at a time anyway. When we see somebody who's successful, we just didn't see him digging for 10 years. We saw them when they got out of the hole. Remember, when they're in the hole, you don't see them. Does that make sense? Is this making sense?